Now let's talk about Sakamoto Days Chapter 211 titled Electric Shock Hazard and Chapter 212 titled Shin's Mission. Let's get started. Shishiba couldn't believe that it was really Kamahati. He answered that they had barely ever spoken before. Shishiba commented that his voice was extremely quiet. Kamahati admitted it was because he rarely ever came down to the surface. Shishiba just replied with a whatever and told him to get ready. Meanwhile, Oki hadn't expected Kamahati to be there either, and he said he thought he'd be more reasonable than that. Still, he just replied, "Screw this garbage." He added that thanks to asshats like them, the morning weather had to be interrupted for a special report. Whatever happens, he said he's on the side of the weather girl and Osaragi. While they were talking, X suddenly attacked using Takamura's persona. With a clean strike of his katana, he sliced through the pillar in that area. Thankfully, Shishiba jumped out of the way just in time, and Kamahati ducked down and managed to avoid it too. When Shishiba asked if he could handle close combat, Kamahati bluntly said hell no. That made Shishiba question why he was even there. To which he answered that it was because he couldn't carry Osaragi on his own while running from that place. Without hesitation, Shishiba picked Osaragi up and carried her on his back. He said it wasn't his style to run off with his tail between his legs, but he had no choice now. Kamahati then fired a shot targeting X. However, X deflected the bullets with his katana while muttering something. Shishiba was surprised at how heavy Osaragi was. When he turned to look, he realized it was because she was still clinging tightly to her shattered buzzsaw. He tried to pry it off, but even though she was unconscious, her grip remained firm. He remarked that they'd probably have to pry it out of her dead hand. Shishiba was impressed. Meanwhile, X leapt into attack. When Shishiba saw him, he didn't back down and brought out his hammer. Kamahati fired again. It wasn't his style, he said, but he had no other choice. He shot at X again, but his ultra-sharp blade sliced the bullet in half. A blast erupted where X stood, damaging part of the building. As they were retreating, Shishiba commented that it was pretty handy, but Kamahati just told him to shut up. When the smoke cleared, X was still standing in the same spot. Torres then asked Oki if he wanted to go after them, but he said no. He was wondering why he felt so uneasy. Suddenly, Kamahati sneezed. Shishiba curiously asked if it was allergies, and he explained that whenever he fires those bullets, it makes his muzzle itchy. But more importantly, he asked if Osaragi was alright. Shishiba couldn't respond, given her condition. Kamahati then suddenly asked who the guy with the freaky hair was. Shishiba paused and turned in surprise. There was a man with spiky hair and prayer beads blocking the path. Shishiba asked what he wanted, but the man just told him not to get too amped up. Kamahati apologized and said they were in a hurry. He fired a shot at him and told him to get lost. But instead of dodging, the man simply raised his hand and said he felt a tingle. He had special nail guards on his hands that could control electricity. He targeted Kamahati from across the area and electrocuted him. Kamahati couldn't react at all as the electric shock hit him, and Shishiba was immediately alarmed. The man approached them and told the sniper not to be so prickly. Shishiba charged at him with his hammer. But again, the enemy was unfazed and easily caught the attack. Shishiba grew frustrated when the man grabbed his trusted weapon and electrocuted it, destroying the hammer in the process. In his mind, Shishiba realized that this guy could easily wield electricity, making him the worst possible match for his weapon. The man smiled and lunged again, while Shishiba admitted he absolutely hated static. They fought head-on, and Shishiba could feel the electrically charged blows. It was like being hit repeatedly with a stun gun. The man just kept smiling and even advised him to find cover. He then repeated the same electric attack he had used earlier on Kamahati. Shishiba was struck directly and couldn't fight back anymore, and so he apologized to Osaragi. However, while lying helpless on the ground, the electric shock that hit him also struck Osaragi. The jolt suddenly woke her up and brought her back to consciousness. She lifted herself up, still gripping her shattered buzzsaw. The man didn't see it coming, so it was already too late by the time he realized that Osaragi had struck him in the face. She hit him with tremendous force using her weapon, destroying the nearby pillar and sending the man flying from where he stood. The impact was so strong that he even coughed up blood. This time, it was Osaragi who carried Shishiba, clenching him with her mouth, and Kamahati slung over her shoulder. She quickly leapt from that floor and smashed through the glass window to escape. Impressively, despite the height, she managed to land safely on the ground below. Meanwhile, the man sat up and laughed. X called him Gozu and told him he was late. Gozu simply replied that he shouldn't be too amped up. He asked curiously who those freaks were, and X answered, "The Order." Gozu commented that they were pretty spicy and declared that he was going to kill them. As Sakamoto stared at their collapsed home and shop, he wondered what was happening to him. He knew it wasn't the time to fall apart. Still, he couldn't help but fall into a daze, because if things had turned out differently, he could have lost his family. A flashback followed, showing the meeting with Kendaka and the others. As they were about to leave, Sakamoto told them to wait because he would join them. He said they needed to calm everyone down. They were surprised by his decision. Kendaka asked if he was sure he was ready for this. He answered yes, saying he wanted to protect their town. So, they quickly moved out. At that time, chaos was beginning to spread throughout the shopping district. A man was pointing a gun at someone, declaring that those guns were rightfully theirs. Because of that, he said they didn't have to explain what they were going to do with them. He warned everyone not to interfere or they'd face the same consequences. Shin quickly grabbed the man's arm to stop him, and the man couldn't do anything. Meanwhile, Boiled had someone else in a chokehold from behind, while Heisuki was trying to calm everyone down. The men started complaining, saying it was obvious that their goal was to take the guns. One of them even claimed they had the right to use the 3 bullets they had. Then, all of them pointed their guns at Sakamoto, saying they intended to bring him down. Shin grew worried upon seeing that. Sakamoto just stood there, while Boiled warned him to watch out. But all Sakamoto could think about was the explosion at their store. The memory made him sweat, and as a result, he couldn't move a muscle, even with all those guns aimed at him. Shin quickly acted and ran behind Sakamoto. He used his ability and told the civilians to shoot him instead. The men followed his movement even though they didn't intend to, wondering why their bodies moved on their own. Shin took the bullets fired at him. Sakamoto was immediately worried for him. Luckily, Shin grabbed a manhole cover and used it as a shield. Boiled slammed the 2 men he was holding into the ground and told them to stop with the nonsense. Kendaka then asked Shin if he was okay. Shin answered that he was fine. In his mind, he knew it wasn't an illusion. He had rewritten the thoughts of a large group of people all at once. And because of that, he came to realize something. Meanwhile, Heisuki ran toward Sakamoto and asked if he was feeling sick. He still couldn't move and just apologized. He couldn't bring himself to fight. His hands were trembling and his body was frozen. His mind was in complete disarray. Kendaka grew concerned, realizing the situation had affected Sakamoto even more deeply than he expected. Sakamoto added that it was utterly devastating to think he almost lost his wife. He knew he had to bring back the assassin spirit inside him. Suddenly, someone spoke up, saying he was wrong. It was Shin. He said that Sakamoto didn't lose anything. On the contrary, he had found something truly valuable in this world. In his view, the fear of losing loved ones wasn't a weakness. True strength lies behind that fear. Sakamoto didn't expect those words and began to reflect. Shin added that he shouldn't hang his head or feel ashamed. He said he actually liked the idea of opening Sakamoto stores all over the country. Sakamoto didn't say anything in response. For now, Shin told him to leave the protecting to him until Sakamoto regains his strength. The scene shifted to the research center, Okatabe branch, lab number 2. Shin had gone there, visibly irritated, saying they were running out of time. The person he was speaking to asked if he was really sure he wanted to go through with this. It turned out to be Asakura, who called him an ignorant brat. He told him to stop babbling and called him a fool. He couldn't believe Shin was only showing up now just to say something that ridiculous. He couldn't accept that Shin wanted to push his ability to its breaking point. He confirmed if he was really serious about that. Shin smiled and said yes. He knew he was the only one who could do it. Asakura explained that, in truth, his ability to modify thoughts relied on finely tuned electrical signals that targeted specific regions of the brain to produce distinct neural activity patterns. Theoretically, they could create a device capable of reading his brain's electrical activity and amplifying it through a stronger signal, like a radio wave, to expand the range. But Shin got annoyed with the technical explanation and told him to just get on with it. Asakura felt disrespected by his commanding tone. In the lab, Shin asked how long it would take if he rushed it. He He replied that it would take around 2 or 3 days, give or take. Shin was frustrated that it would take that long. Asakura reminded him that he was a scientist, not an engineer. In his mind, while he wasn't outright rejecting Shin's request, he definitely wasn't fully on board with it either. Suddenly, someone arrived and offered assistance. Both of them turned to look and were shocked to see it was Kashima. Shin said he thought Kashima was dead, but Kashima replied that he had been searching for Shin too. Asakura was irritated upon seeing him, saying he never thought he'd have to lay eyes on his disgusting face again. He asked how Kashima even had the nerve to show up there after everything he'd done. Shin explained that Kashima was no longer a threat. Kashima's arm was now a mechanical claw. Kashima admitted that, back then, he was convinced his sense of justice was correct. He now knew he had been wrong, and he apologized to them. The two were caught off guard by that. Kashima added that he genuinely wanted to put an end to all the violence happening now, so he pleaded with them to let him help. Asakura was curious as to what had changed his mind, and so Kashima explained that X had been consumed by blind violence, and now he only wanted to satisfy his thirst for revenge. As a result, many innocent people were suffering. X's actions now were far from the concept of justice Kashima once believed in. Asakura had no choice but to allow him to help. So he showed them his plan. He presented the blueprint for the device and told them they only had 1 hour to complete it. Kashima agreed without hesitation. Back in the city, chaos had broken out among the people. The men there were rallying to take down the bastards, Sakamoto and his group. They began searching for them, demanding that they show themselves. Meanwhile, Kendaka, Boiled, and Heisuke were running through the area. When asked where Shin was, Kendaka said he had no clue, but he mentioned that Shin had a plan. Shin was seen standing somewhere, holding a megaphone and wearing headphones. He was actually on top of a signal tower, along with Kashima and Asakura. They reminded him to be careful. Asakura warned him that his brain would be going through a tough test, so he shouldn't push himself too hard if he started feeling exhausted. Shin agreed, and simply said to push it to maximum power. Asakura was irritated and called him a little brat. Facing the city, Shin waited for Asakura's signal. Once he gave the go-ahead, Shin focused, and then called out to everyone carrying a weapon. He looked up and commanded them to fire at the ground and shoot every bullet they had.